Joining us on 710 KURV, Dr. Aaron Pomerantz is a social psychologist and a researcher, and he's appeared in many, many places. Current Psychology, Journal of Police and Criminal Psychology, and many, many other places. He joins us now. So what are some things that you would like to see, your Christmas list, as it were, for the Trump administration, foreign policy-wise, and why?
Well, I think my current biggest Christmas item is less of a gift and more of a return label, and that would be, assuming what we're hearing is true, that President Biden basically bullied Israel into this latest ceasefire, saying that if they didn't agree and give him a foreign policy victory, he was going to side with the UN against Israel. So that would be one of my biggest wants, would be to that no longer be around for the next foreign policy team in the next administration to say, actually, no, we're not gonna force you to keep establishing ceasefires with people who historically break them, and then continue that pattern of insanity.
Yeah, you got to imagine that Biden lost all of his leverage once Trump won. There's nothing the Biden administration can say or do that would force Israel into that kind of a hole again, as they know that they just have to wait the clock out.
Yeah, that's more or less that's why I think that the ceasefire deal is many things all at once. And on the one hand, yeah, I do think it's outrageous, again, assuming this leak proves true, that President Biden basically said, yeah, I'm going to spend until Trump takes office, no more weapons for Israel. We're going to just leave you high and dry. But at the same time, it's a ceasefire deal that does allow for Israel to still defend itself, and assuming that Biden shockingly can't actually get Hezbollah to do what he wants, Israel can still defend themselves without any serious consequences. And they can just hold out until the next administration and hope that President Trump is more sympathetic to their aims.
Dr. Aaron Pomerantz joining us now. He's got an op-ed in Real Clear World titled "Western Leaders Must Abandon Cultural Imperialism in Middle East Policy." Help us expand those thoughts for us today.
Yeah, so actually the ceasefire is kind of a great example of what I was talking about in the piece. And the idea is that, the Middle East is its own culture. It is a form of culture called culture of honor. It's a logic that places its value, the central value of a human being, on their reputation, especially reputation for strength and toughness and willingness to retaliate against threat or insult. Now, here in the West, we don't tend to operate according to those norms. Certainly our leaders don't, and certainly President Biden doesn't. And before him, President Carter didn't. And the issue is that when you try to get into a cultural milieu, you have to think like the people in the culture do. So, like a perfect example, my boss was a general in the U.S. Army, and he likes to tell the story about how, when he was deployed to the Middle East, the generals of the local forces, they ate first. And some of the American and British officers were just really incensed by this. They're like, a good leader eats last. This is something that we see in a lot of American TV and movies, right? Like, a good leader eats last. Well, they forced the locals to do that, and discipline disappeared within 2 weeks because the general saying that, actually, I'm going to wait until you guys eat, was interpreted as a lack of discipline and weakness, and now it's time to test him and see what he can actually do. So it seems all well and good in our Western society that a leader eats last. But in the other culture, that doesn't work. When it comes to foreign policy, it makes a lot of sense to us, especially, it's the holidays. If you like war movies and you like holiday movies, there's the famous movie Joyeux Noël, the Great Christmas Truce from World War I. We have this idea that, oh, no, people are reasonable, they're rational, you can have these truces, you can have ceasefires, people can come to the table and seek a rational solution to this. Air quotes, massive air quotes around that word rational. But that's not how it's worked in the Middle East, and that's never how it's worked in the Middle East. And previous foreign administrations' foreign policy has suffered because of this. Jimmy Carter trusted the Ayatollah of Iran, and it absolutely bit him in the rear end. Joe Biden seems to think that if we, this time maybe Hezbollah means that they'll keep a ceasefire, even though they haven't kept the last one. The same way he wants a ceasefire deal with Hamas, except Hamas broke it too. There comes a point where just saying, oh, we aren't going to fight you anymore, in the logic of the Middle East, an honor and shame culture, they don't think like that. The entire idea is, oh, you want us to stop fighting? That means we're just going to wait until you're not looking, and we're going to strike even harder. And when you add to that the complex history and geopolitics at work here, Western leaders really need to stop pretending that they can just waltz into a place that has a long memory and an even longer history and a very different way of thinking, and that they can just come in and say, you will do this and this will work. Because when you do that, you end up with disastrous foreign policy decisions. And that's what I think the Biden administration, they're trying to spin this as a victory, like he gets one last victory before he leaves office. And I'm like, I don't think this legacy is going to be victory. I think the legacy of this so-called ceasefire is going to be once again showing Western leaders are just trying to inflict their views on the dynamics of a situation where they don't fit.
And to an extent, that's kind of what happened in Afghanistan, right? It's like, okay, you guys are free now, and then things kind of reverted back to the way they were. Davis Rankin, your foreign policy questions for Dr. Aaron Pomerantz. Go ahead.
So how should the president now, or the incoming president, which is a long time to wait in this, what should he do? He says, I've changed my mind and I believe, boom. Prosecute a war. No, I was curious. Israel's been criticized for going after Hamas and inflicting a lot of death and destruction. They say Gaza's nearly flattened. What else should they have done to get at Hamas? What should Netanyahu do now to prosecute the war? The war.
I mean, I think one thing that Netanyahu should potentially do is leave office. He's massively unpopular in his own
Good luck.
country.
That's
Good luck
a spicy
with that.
take. Not going to lie. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I think he should get out while the getting is good, but I doubt he's going to. But I think in terms of prosecuting the war, there's a lot of things that go on there. I do think that there is a case to be made for potentially investigating how Netanyahu's forces prosecuted the war in Gaza. The issue is that it can't be done by the UN, because the UN has such a long and blatant history of being anti-Semitic, of hating Israel, of applying a double standard to Israel while they allow countries like Pakistan and Iran to sit on human rights commissions, to say nothing of China and Russia. It can't be the UN who does that investigation. I think that letting it be done by friendly countries in the area, such as the United Arab Emirates, potentially normalization with the Saudis, although there are cases to be made on both sides of that issue. But one of the things that Trump's previous administration did well, and one of the most long-standing triumphs of that administration from a foreign policy perspective, was the Abraham Accords. And I think taking that spirit of we're not going to just replace the British military, the British Empire, in terms of telling you people over there what to do. Figure it out yourselves, but we would like to help you do it. I think that's the approach that needs to be taken. I think when it comes to the war in Gaza, also specifically, let's just acknowledge that there's a lot of complicated dynamics going on there as well. Nobody likes Hamas. The Palestinian cause is a very popular political football for nations to throw around there. It's not something they particularly actually care about. So I think that however that issue is approached by the next administration, they need to be aware of the complexities to which they're wading into, and not be so easily swayed by blatant propaganda or a desire to win a few votes in Michigan.
Hey, right. Dr. Pomerantz, thanks a lot for joining us. Where can people find more information about what you're up to?
You can find me on Twitter at pompom9211, and you can keep an eye out for me. They'll be posting my stuff on the Young Voices website as well.
Check out the Real Clear World op-ed that Dr. Pomerantz has, Western Leaders Must Abandon Cultural Imperialism in Middle East Policy. That's Dr. Aaron Pomerantz joining us on News Talk 710 KURV.